Value Impulses with Dr. Ulrich Vogel. Personal diagnostics insights, leadership, assessments, and personnel development. A warm welcome to you, dear listener, to our new episode, to our show here in the pre-Christmas season, which I've titled, Why Some Values Only Show Up at Christmas and What You Can Do About It. Only at Christmas? Well, maybe that's a bit harsh, but they mostly show up around Christmas time. And, I've divided this into 3 parts. First, I've picked out a few Christmas values that are typically associated with the season, and I'll briefly talk about them. The second part then deals with how we might be able to cultivate these values in our everyday lives, even when it's not Christmas. And third, I'll take a look at our social responsibility when we consider the values I've picked out. Of course, this is selective. I'd be interested to know which values you consider especially important at Christmas, in addition to what I'm talking about here, and how you might bring them into your everyday life, even when it's not Christmas. So why are we talking about so-called Christmas values today? First, because we're in the lead up to Christmas, and second, because these are pretty central, pretty important values. And I've picked out 3 of them here: love, peace, and solidarity/helpfulness, which, as you can see from the various initiatives and so on, always come up around this time. And the question is, how can we live these values more in our everyday lives? Let me start with love, which includes love itself, love for others, self-love, and so on. Maybe we need to reflect on what love actually means, because it's really important to add the adjective unconditional here, right? That's what a lot of people don't understand. They say, well, I love you if you do this, that, and the other thing. And, it really has to be that. I don't know, the house is tidy, or that you give me my freedom. Otherwise, when it comes to love, it's not really that serious. So it's often misunderstood because, true love is ultimately free from expectations, being able to just let go. It's about the other person's well-being being, so to speak, even more important than your own. Yeah, and even if it hurts, I've also had that experience in my life when something ended that you still, wish the other person happiness. And of course, we have neighborly love, which is also part of the Christian approach. And what often gets forgotten is that, if you read more closely, Jesus actually included self-love as a foundation here, so to speak, Love your neighbor as yourself, it says. Yeah, but what exactly is this self-love? Right. It's not selfishness, but rather self-acceptance. First, recognizing who you are, then accepting yourself as you are, and then, so to speak, building and developing yourself according to your potential, so that you can give back to society what you've achieved through that. Hartman described it beautifully in his 4 steps of self-development, which I've already talked about in a previous episode. So, know yourself, recognize yourself, then, take yourself, or as he put it, accept yourself, then build yourself, construct yourself, develop yourself, and finally, devote yourself and give back to society. So the topic of love, as we can see, is already quite demanding. Let's take the topic of peace. That's something that's really prominent in politics, or, geopolitically speaking, it moves the whole world. In times of crisis, that's obviously relevant, especially when we have conflicts like in Ukraine or the Middle East, and there are also really strong geopolitical antagonisms behind that. On one side, we have liberal democracy, or you could say the free world, and on the other side, autocratic regimes that actually see freedom as something dangerous. And that's exactly where there's a lot of friction, with a high potential for escalation. And here again, referring to Hartman, his book The Revolution Against War came out a few years ago. Cliff Hurst distilled it from his files, or rather, from his estate. And it says there that peace, so to speak, begins with the recognition of other viewpoints, or rather, that the virus of war lies in intolerance within society. If I no longer respect the other person's point of view, I can still discuss things with them, but if I stop respecting them, then we start drawing boundaries, and that's when divisions arise in society, and eventually, those divisions also appear on a broader, even international, scale. Peace, so, an extremely, important topic. Especially, the festival of love and peace, Christmas is often called that. And then we have the third value here, solidarity and helpfulness. We see all of this in the actions as, as a reflection of societal values, that we stand up for each other here, that helpfulness is the glue of society. And I mean, ultimately, that's also the core, of the success of human society. If we go back to the Stone Age, which I often like to reference, it was absolutely crucial that we helped each other, otherwise it wouldn't have worked. Yeah, and it was basically a death sentence if someone was cast out of the group and had to survive alone in the wild. Yeah, so we have, mutual aid, helping each other, is the absolute foundational value, of basically every human society, which, by the way, is also where the principle of insurance comes from. Very few people who work in insurance actually know that this is the real background. So, these are really, important values that I'm talking about here, and they usually come up more often around Christmas, or maybe they're just, or very much projected onto Christmas. And, now the question in part 2 is, how can I cultivate this in everyday life? How can I, carry something like this forward so that, in the long run, it strengthens the foundation, the basis of our society? Right, and first you have to ask why these values actually always seem to disappear again after Christmas. Well, everyday hustle and bustle, stress, yeah. I could also say, it's similar to New Year's resolutions. Everyone knows what that's like, I think. The half-life is actually pretty short. I read an article recently. I think it said that after 3 to 6 weeks, 90% of these resolutions actually fall apart. So that means, our attention shifts again and the values fade into the background, yeah. And that's simply not thought through to the end. You really have to stand up and make an appeal. We rarely reflect on the consequences when we don't genuinely live out values like solidarity, helpfulness, peace, or even love. Yeah, just having them pop up now at Christmas and then thinking that's enough of a dose for the rest of the year, that just doesn't work. That means values also need to be lived, practiced, and turned into habits. And it's just like we don't learn a foreign language by taking a quick course or two, or just a couple of days, and it's the same with an instrument. No, we have to practice it constantly, we have to keep at it, and unfortunately, it just doesn't work any other way. So, how can we bring more values into our everyday lives? What approaches are there? Robert S. Hartman is really great when it comes to this. I've already explained the value matrix several times. If you're interested in hearing more about this, check out episode 21, where I talk about using the value matrix with external, internal, and the 3 value dimensions, human, practical, and systemic, to regularly reflect on your own values and how you put them into practice. Another option is to introduce concrete rituals related to important values. A daily reflection, yeah. For example, what did I do today? What did I do that, in some way, expresses solidarity, love, or maybe even compromise, willingness, peace, or helpfulness, yeah. And then, maybe another option, yeah, is to bring in storytelling here. Or, storytelling. So, I often use it as an exercise in my seminars, where I then ask, try to remember. So I discussed Hartman's hierarchy of values. Human things are more valuable than practical things, which in turn are more valuable than systemic things. And then you take a look at which forms of government lean in which direction. And then I ask, think back to situations where Hartman's hierarchy of values worked, yeah. And also, think about situations where this hierarchy of values was violated, yeah. And what were the consequences then? And, that's quite nice, because it sparks discussions about those little everyday situations, yeah. I had a seminar recently, and one participant said, yeah, there was a time when my boss said to me, after I made a suggestion, you're not paid to think here. Yeah. I mean, it really doesn't get any more demeaning than that. Yeah. And that actually led to a very strong and long-lasting demotivation. So we really do have ways to cultivate this in our daily lives, and I encourage you to reflect on that and to do it more often. And finally, part 3, the social responsibility that we have. Values are really social anchors. And especially solidarity, helpfulness, love, and peace are, in my opinion, the foundation for a harmonious, and not just harmonious, but also thriving, way of living together, even beyond Christmas. And harmonious is often, a bit misunderstood. In companies, things can definitely be harmonious in general. That means you feel comfortable. Harmony is also, in music, a good sound. But that doesn't mean you don't have discussions or that you don't rub up against each other. I always say we have to wrestle for the best solution in companies, like in sports. But the foundation underneath all that is mutual help, helpfulness, love, and also peace. In companies, it's about willingness to compromise. It's also about balancing interests, and also generating majorities for certain proposals. Yeah. And yes, when I come in here as a social anchor, profiling values is of course also a multiplier. Yeah. Hartman's science of values promotes leadership and team building. Yeah, for example, I also showed this in episodes 8 and 9 of the podcast. Yeah, how values can practically guide you in leadership and how the value of responsibility plays a special role there. So maybe, you could also check out episodes 8 and 9 again. Yeah, so it's about taking small steps to anchor values in everyday life. And often, it's enough just to show empathy, to actually practice helpfulness in small ways, the little things. Yeah, it's always said that small gifts keep friendships alive, but it's also the little things that add to the emotional relationship account. It's like thinking of it as a bank account. Yeah, seek dialogue with others, and especially with people who think differently. Of course, that's a bit more challenging than always sitting together with people who think the same way you do. And then we say, yeah, oh, everything is so terrible and everything is so great. That's too easy, yeah. So, I'll just quickly sum up the main points. Love, in all its forms, peace, and solidarity, helpfulness or mutual support, are important Christmas values that can be cultivated in everyday life, yeah. And now, another question for you: which values are especially important to you? Beyond that, maybe, how can you actually live these values every day? So, I'd like to invite you to share your thoughts, and maybe even your experiences with Christmas values, with us, with me. Feel free to email us at info@profilingvalues.com or reach out on LinkedIn, either to me personally or on our page, or simply leave a comment on the podcast platforms where you listen to us. So, let's learn and grow together. I wish you a wonderful rest of the pre-Christmas season and a good way of embracing the Christmas values. Glad you stayed with us until the end. Hope to see you again soon. Bye for now.